Alright, question we typically are asked about are different types of paint booth filters that are offered, why use a certain kind over another, and some options on how you can keep your either filter costs down or as well as improve change out efficiency. It can be important in your plant or in your paint work because as you know, changing filters is one task that you aren't getting paid for, but is a necessary maintenance task to keep your booth clean and running properly. So we're going to run through a couple different types of filters here, options, and show you what the differences between them are, as well as some ideas of pricing differences, so you can understand which filter might work for you. And ultimately, a lot of times it's a matter of picking out an option or two and working on a trial basis or test basis to see if you can improve how long they last for you, as well as how well they perform. One common thing you can do to improve or reduce your filter change out potentially is to use a visual gauge. There's two main reasons you want to do that. They're called a manometer, and they're used to determine when your filter resistance is too high. So by using a visual gauge, you may be changing out filters too quick because your paint booth filter appears dirty when really it's still able to be used, but you're just using a visual cue instead of the gauge that will actually measure resistance across the filter. Now, if you ever see the lazy air in your paint booth, meaning oversprays hanging instead of being pulled out immediately, then your filters are probably needing changed, even if the gauge doesn't show you. We do have a video on installing and calibrating a paint booth manometer. We'll link to it below, and that could be something to review so that you understand how the manometer functions and how you can install one if you don't have one. You also want one because it is a safety requirement in many areas to have that visual gauge. So with that being said, we're going to go over some of the options when you have when it comes to filters. Filters are listed often in grams as far as the gram of the filter. So this is a 22 gram filter. It's about 2 inches in density. The gram of the filter refers to how thick and dense the filter is, and so that will often determine how well overspray will capture in the filter, but it also determines price. So the higher the grams of the filter, the more expensive, but typically you should see longer times in between filter change outs, which when you compare the cost of the filter to the potential savings of downtime in your paint process, it can be a good idea to go with a higher gram filter. Additionally, it'll keep your booth running well long term as you prevent overspray from passing the filter and getting built up on your fan and similar issues. This is a 22 gram filter. It's a good general purpose industrial filter. Could be used for wood finishes, automotive. So 22 gram is typically the lowest that we would recommend for you to consider. It'll do a good job capturing overspray. It's not terribly expensive and will perform well. So for the 22 gram filter, you can get about 100 of these for about $138. That's for a 20 by 20 design, which is your most common paint booth exhaust filter size. So it's $1.38 a filter. If you want to look at an option for cost savings and time efficiency, you could go with a blanket style filter. You get those in 300-foot rolls for anywhere from $230 to $280 depending on the width of the roll. And oftentimes for a 3 or 4 foot wide blanket, you'd be able to change out your entire booth a multitude of times before you would replace that roll. And then that can be used with a quick lock system, which essentially grabs the top of the filter, and then that would hang down from the ceiling and to the floor, allowing you to quickly change that filter. And because you're buying in a large bulk roll, you'd have some savings there. So this is the 22 gram filter. Next we'll show you a step down from that, which is a 15 gram filter. So as you see, the 15 gram filter has a much smaller and lighter backing to it. So these really won't last that long. And as a general, only as a single stage filter, they're generally a little light for most use. They could be well used in a 2-stage system where you're going to use a pocket filter behind this filter. A 2-stage system enables you to use a cheaper sacrificial first layer, and then the back layer, the pocket itself, protects the fan and ultimately catches any residual overspray. And that can be a way to also save money by going with a pocket state filter in the back with a filter and blanket in the front. That can be a way to have strong performance but at a little bit of a lower cost than if you just go with strictly a 1-stage top of the end top of the line filter. The pockets are expensive initially. They can be a $4 to $5 per pocket expense, but by layering it with a very low cost sacrificial first layer or blanket, you can keep the overall filter system cost down, but increase the performance. For the pockets, this is an example of a pocket style filter. You can see they come in different depths, and they also come in different numbers of pockets. The deeper the pocket is, the more captured overspray will be in that pocket before you throw it away, but also the initial higher cost. And then with the number of pockets, that also increases the amount of overspray that captures, because there's more surface area for the overspray to capture. These are a great option if you're spraying aerospace coatings. These are often a requirement as a part of a NESHAP compliant filter system, and that usually requires both a pocket and then a first stage filter at the minimal, or depending if you have an older style booth, you may need a 3-stage system with a pocket and 2 layers in between. But pockets can be a way to keep your overall filter costs down with keeping performance up, or if you're in NESHAP compliance, you would be required to have them. That's an option. Typically a single stage will be more cost effective. So for the 15-gram filter, for a pack of 100, you're about $100, so about $1 a piece versus the $1.38 for the 22-gram filters. For a roll, they're roughly 130 to upwards of 200 depending on the filter width. And so these can make a very affordable front layer or for a 2-stage system, but typically as your only filter, they're a little bit on the light side and wouldn't be an ideal suggestion, because they're going to allow a fair amount of overspray to pass through. They aren't 99% efficient like the 22 grams that we just saw were. These are about 98% efficient. So that can create overspray on your fan blade if they're the only filter you're using, and ultimately they will load up with overspray a little quicker because the filter itself is not as thick. So that's a 15-gram style. And then this would be called an E28 style filter. It's a 3-inch thick. You can see the backing is a lot more substantial, and then there's an intermediate layer between the top and the backing itself. So what that provides for you is kind of your ultimate as far as overspray capture and longevity of use. That being said, they are a little bit more of an initial expense for an E28 filter. They can be a great option for your only a single stage filter option. These are the 22 gram, would be the first choice for most single stage options. These come in rolls as well, so you can use them with a pocket if you wanted, or it'd be even better at just your only filter, but in a blanket style. So for the E28, they're about $105 for 50 of them. So you are spending about $2 per filter. But again, with each increase in the gram or quality of the filter that you choose, you should typically see a life last of that filter about 20 to 50% more. So when you figure that in, if your production time's worth it, it can be worth considering, plus the protection of your fan. So these can be bought in a roll too. Again, they're about $250 depending on the width of roll you select. So this is a 3-inch filter, and so from there, your final stage you can kind of jump up to. These are what are called paint pockets. Again, they're about 3 inches long. They are a little more solid. They're just a solid, complete thickness filter. So they are a little more expensive for about 90 of them. For 30 of them, you're going to spend about $90, but they tend to be the most thick of the filters, so you can oftentimes see the most length of use out of them. So ultimately, what filter makes the most sense will depend on what you're spraying and what's the most important to you. Typically, you want to evaluate an option or two to see whether or not one would improve your life of spray before you change them, helping you to work longer in between changing out filters. Plus, you have to figure in disposal costs of the filter. So the more often you change filters, the higher your disposal costs. So that can make sense why you may invest in a filter that's going to last you a little longer. And then second is the protection of your booth, and third is the cost of the filter itself. And we've covered some ways you might be able to reduce your cost of filters. If you need help on getting trials or questions on any particular option that might make sense for what you're spraying and what you're using, you can leave them in the comments below, and we do offer all these filters in our store as well. So thank you for watching.